Today I'm talking with Lisa Nunamaker, a landscape architect and the founder of Paper Garden Workshop, where she teaches garden design and landscape graphics to aspiring designers. Lisa has a beautiful way of thinking about gardens, not just the collections of plants, but as spaces designed for connection and for gathering. I met Lisa at an APLD conference. I had been following her work for quite some time, but it was so fun to meet her in person and to get to know her because she is just a lovely human being. She is just somebody who wants to share knowledge. We're talking about those places in the garden where people naturally gravitate and why it matters to draw out your vision or conceptualize your space, even if you're not planning to tackle it all at the same time. Welcome to the Relish Gardens podcast, where we have conversations about the intersection between the garden and your life and how all of those things are intertwined. How to care for your space, how to prune, basically everything that's related to the design, development, and keeping of a garden. I'm Claire Liddell Hanna, the founder and lead designer at Relish Gardens, where we build, design, and maintain beautiful gardens. Let's dig in. Lisa, I'm so glad that you're here. And do you want to just go ahead and give a quick intro of who you are and what it is that you're doing?
I am Lisa Nunamaker, and my background's in landscape architecture, and I've taught landscape design at Iowa State University for many years, and now I teach online at papergardenworkshop.com. And at Paper Garden Workshop, we teach graphics on how to draw landscape design elements. We teach a class once a year on that, Garden Graphics Toolkit. And then we have a design membership where we learn different design topics every month. And it's a community. So we're not only learning, but we can learn from each other and support each other as designers also, which is cool. So whether you're beginning designer, you're a homeowner, or you've done this for 20 years, we have a great community for that. I saw a gap in that long time ago, and I wanted to be able to provide that to designers so they can ask those questions of each other. Because I always tell them, I don't know everything, but collectively, we know a lot.
Will you give me a little bit of the trajectory of your career and how you've kind of gotten to be where you're at right now and doing the work that
Yeah.
you're doing?
Both my degrees are in landscape architecture because, one wasn't enough. And when I went to school, though, I didn't know, when I applied to college, I didn't know landscape architecture existed. I remember telling my counselor in high school, this was back in the late 80s, saying to him, I really want to do something outside, like design outdoor spaces and I like cities and like that kind of planning type of stuff. He goes, "Oh, that's civil engineering. You should go into civil engineering." And I'm like, "That doesn't sound right. Civil engineering is awesome, but it's not me." So I actually applied to the architecture program at Iowa State because I knew what an architect was because of the Brady Bunch. Because we used to watch that all the time. And I'm like, that's close. Like, it's not exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew it was a design thing because I used to design a lot of stuff with my Lego blocks and my Barbie dolls. And I used to love designing all the time. Love Lego blocks.
Yeah.
And when I got to Iowa State, I got to go through the orientation of all the design areas within the College of Design, and landscape architecture was one of them in orientation. So I'm going through this. I'm like, that's what it is. So at orientation, I made sure I was in landscape architecture instead of architecture. So I'm one of the few students that got to start in landscape architecture because a lot of people,
Wow.
switch over to landscape design or landscape architecture later because they didn't know it existed. So loved school, got a job out of school right at Iowa State, started practicing right away. I worked at Iowa State University as a landscape designer and then landscape architect after I got my license. And then while I was working at Iowa State as a landscape architect, I was asked to come into classrooms to just talk about topics like the elements of garden design or what garden rooms were, that kind of thing. And then I got to teach in the landscape architecture department sometimes while I worked full time in the facilities planning area. And eventually I'm like, I really like teaching. I mean, I love designing, but I just really love teaching too. And a position came open at our new botanic garden, Ryman Gardens. Their position was the adult education and volunteer coordinator. And I'm like, oh, that sounds so fun. I really want to do that. I didn't have any kind of education background or anything, but I knew design and I knew landscape design, of course. And I applied and I got that job. And you wouldn't believe how many people said to me, but why would you leave landscape architecture behind? I'm like, I'm not. I get to teach it now and study it and learn about history and more design and talk to designers. And it was so much fun. So I worked at Ryman Gardens for about 10 years. And it was the
Wow.
best thing. So I was the education coordinator at first and volunteer coordinator, and then I became the assistant director. And
Wow.
that's where I developed my theme garden process. And anybody can go on my website now. And if you sign up for the peanut butter and jelly garden is my ebook that I wrote. I developed that process at Ryman Gardens because we wanted to have fresh themes every year to get
Okay.
people to come back to the Botanic Garden. So I would work with all the areas to make sure we were all following the theme. I mean, everything from horticulture to entomology to the
Wow.
retail to the store to the custodian. She was always involved. And so everybody was involved in that process to make sure everything came together. And one of my favorite things to do is to take two unrelated ideas and
Yes.
bring them together for fresh ideas. So it was
Yes.
super fun to like we would be talking about entomology, like we had a butterfly house, that's why.
Yeah.
And we would talk about like, okay, how does that relate to this theme this year? If the
Yeah.
theme was art or if the theme was garden ornament, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
It was fun to try to use that framework to be able to see design and entomology in new ways. And it was super, super fun
I
to
love
do
that
that.
so much because I think it gets that creative process going because you have to like build those connectors. I think it's such a great way to kind of develop a new perspective. It kind of pulls you out of what you've been doing and it gives you the ability to think, whether or not you use all of the ideas, it
Right.
sparks that like creative process. One of the reasons why people are drawn to gardening is for creative outlet, you know?
Yeah.
I
Hmm.
love that. I love that. And I
Yeah.
love that it's like it was like immersive too. And bringing
Yes.
entomology and like peanut butter and jelly. I mean,
Yeah, everything it was fun, and
that's
I just feel
awesome.
fortunate to be able to work with that staff. We would have brainstorming sessions that they were willing to do all these crazy ideas, and it was
Ooh,
super fun to do that. My
I
husband and
love
I were
that.
actually talking this morning about what you just said. You're actually more creative when you have boundaries,
Yes.
and having a theme is one of those ways to give yourself a boundary. It could be a budget too. It could be
Yeah.
other things like I only want red or I want
Mhm.
whatever you want in your design from a client. We should accept those boundaries because that's actually going to make us more creative.
Ooh,
Yeah.
I love that. I 100% agree with that. I love a good hard line where it's like you have to think around it to
Yeah.
make it work, and I think some of the best ideas kinda come
Yeah.
from those limitations, and I think we don't kinda, like, honor those limitations enough in
Yeah.
creative work because I really do think that that's where you get interesting concepts.
Yeah. I mean, even if you're doing an ecologically based planting, just
Yeah.
that is giving you a boundary because you're saying, I only want to use native plants.
Right.
So, I mean, anything can be that boundary, which is cool. So, yeah, so
Yeah.
that's what I developed at Ryman Gardens. We
Yeah.
did that for years, and that staff was the most talented staff. That's where I learned about horticulture more.
Mhm.
I was with the most talented horticulturalists, and they were awesome plant designers. I'm definitely a better designer because of them. The entomologist there, Nathan, was awesome. I mean, everything there was amazing. I learned so much. But then what I left there actually to teach at Iowa State in the horticulture department because there was a position open. And I always laugh. I always tell my students, like, I didn't get that position the first time. It actually a landscape design position opened in the horticulture department. And I didn't get it. I wasn't even like looked at.
Mhm.
And the second time I did get an interview when it opened up again like 3 years later. And I got that position, and it was the coolest position ever. Best department chair, best department. Oh my gosh, horticulture is amazing. So I got to teach there in landscape design for about, I think it was 13 years.
Wow.
People would always call me and say, "Hey, can you do a talk for my garden group on landscape
Yeah.
design?" I'm like, "Oh my gosh, how do you take
Where do you
landscape
st
design, my 4 or 5 year program, and condense it into an hour?" I always struggled with that.
Yeah.
But then when I started teaching, I'm like, "Oh, this is how you break it down." Because, I had to break down the lessons into different topics each week, and so
Yeah.
teaching was one of the best things that could help me as a teacher. I know it sounds so funny,
Yeah.
but teaching really helped me understand how to break things down, and
Truth.
because I had already designed, how do you take these concepts and actually apply them then? So, yeah, I was very, very fortunate. I don't think I could teach online now as comfortably as I do if I didn't teach in the classroom with actual people for 13 years.
'Cause you get that feedback, that instant feedback that you just really
Yes.
don't get online. Yeah,
Yeah.
'cause
It's true because when I developed my first online class, I couldn't have done it without all the feedback, like you said, I had gotten. I mean,
yeah.
obviously, when students are with you in person, they can be like, "This is confusing. Why are you doing it this way?" And then I would have to think of another way of
Mhm.
doing it. The other thing is anticipation. Like, when you teach for 10 years, you anticipate questions. Like the same ones come up.
Mm.
After a while,
Yeah.
though, I get better and I'm like, okay, maybe I should teach that concept so they don't keep asking about it. And then you get a little bit better about it, but still things come up. And
Yeah.
yeah, I feel very fortunate for that experience.
At what point did you start Paper Garden Workshop? I remember following it a long time ago. I was kind of like playing with this idea of going into landscape design. And so I
Yeah.
started following you. I mean, I feel like it was 2015 or something like
Yeah.
that when I moved into my current home. I saw your work and was like, oh, this is cool. So it was kind of fun to like actually get to meet
That's
you. I
so
was like,
cool.
oh my gosh. And then just drawing it out because I had been like working it out myself from my different gardens because I had moved a lot. And so trying to figure it all out myself and measuring it and drawing it out on like graph
Mhm.
paper and then I'd, move and set up another garden and then move and set up another garden. And then I saw your stuff. I was like, oh my gosh, there's people doing this. This is amazing.
Oh, that's so cool. I'm glad you found me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that you wanna know about that progression.
Yeah.
So, back in probably 2009, I'm guessing,
Okay.
2008, I
Maybe that's when it
decided
was.
I wanted to force myself to draw every day.
Nice.
And I'm like, this whole new blog thing, and
Mhm.
blogger, and like, this is so cool. I wanna be on here. And so I made the decision that I was gonna draw something every single day for an entire year, just to force me to practice doing something.
Yeah.
Like what is something I can draw every day that I don't have to research, it doesn't have
Mhm.
to overwhelm me, and I'm like, I'll just do food, right? We all
Mhm.
eat. I am not a chef. I am nothing like that at all, but it was just easy for me to do that. And I'm like, okay, how else can I make this easy? I'll just buy something that has the same format. So I got playing cards, and my daughter actually would help me. We would lay them out on the table, and we would just brush paint on a whole bunch of playing cards. And then every day I would just pick one of those cards and I would draw
Yeah.
and paint whatever I wanted to do that day. So if I had, I don't know, Rice Krispie treats. Actually, I think Rice Krispie treats were the first thing that I ever made. That was the number one thing in that first year. And then every day I would just do something new. And there were some days I was frantic, like, it's almost midnight and I haven't posted anything yet. But I did it. I actually accomplished it. And I still have my box of playing cards. And it's crazy seeing the progression too. Like, I feel like they just seemed better as I
Yeah.
moved for that entire year. Actually, I met a lot of bloggers during that time too. I actually still work with Eat, Live, Travel, Right. Marty, she's a Canadian food blogger. And I still do illustrations for her today. I met a lot of
Awesome.
people during that time. And I even won a food blogger award, which I think is kind of funny because I don't cook or anything. My husband's the chef. But anyway, so I did that for a year. It's called the Lunchbox Project. I don't even know if it's still out.
That's probably that
Do you
must have
remember
been where
that?
that must have been where I saw it. I love cooking. It's like cooking and gardening to me, like they were hand in hand for a very long time because I could, control the produce. And so I
Yes.
love eating out of my garden. And so I was always trying to figure out like pretty ways to, to develop these gardens. And so that totally makes sense. That must
Yeah.
have been where it was.
And actually, my ex-husband, who I was married to at the time, is a big, big, big gardener in terms of food also. So we
Okay.
had, I would say, like a half an acre of land down the street from our
Oh,
house.
wow.
And he did it all. We just had to eat it, or we would help him like snap peas and that kind of
Yeah.
thing. And so a lot of the cards were vegetables because of that, because we had so many, which is nice. But then, yeah,
Amazing.
after that year, I kind of dabbled for a few more months. I'm like, I shouldn't be doing this anymore. I really should do what I know, which is
Right.
garden design, right? Because that's my
Yeah.
background. And I was practicing as a landscape architect at the time. So I moved over to a website called Topiary and Tiramisu
Oh.
because I was trying to take food now and gardens and kind of like make that transition.
Right. Right.
And it really didn't click for me. So that lasted not very long. And then I moved over to Paper Garden Workshop right before I applied to the Iowa State job because I'm like, I want them to see that I'm writing and I'm involved with design. So I actually started Paper Garden Workshop. So then when I got the job, which I was so excited about at horticulture, and I have to point out one thing. You're probably like, there's so much Iowa State here. You can never believe this has happened. So I have a landscape architecture degree, but somehow at the same university, I would get 3 jobs, all totally different in different departments, but they all still relate to my degree. Like, how can that even happen? So I was a landscape architect for the facilities department where we actually practiced. Then I
Okay.
worked at Ryman Gardens as the assistant director and education coordinator, but I needed to have that design knowledge to be able to do
Yeah.
those jobs. And then I started teaching landscape design in the Department of Horticulture. And I needed all those experiences. I needed to understand marketing from the Botanic Garden. I needed to understand horticulture from the Botanic Garden. I needed to understand construction. I got my license only because I worked
Oh.
in the facilities department and I worked under 2 landscape architects who were amazing, and they let me fail and mess up so I could learn. Like, I feel so
That's
fortunate about that
amazing.
now. I'm like, I could have easily have had people above me being like, "What are you doing?" But they were very supportive, and they were like,
Mm.
"You messed up. What did you learn from it?" I'm like, "Yeah, I guess, yeah." And I got to work with their maintenance crews, and I got to install things sometimes. They let me do that so I could learn. Like,
Nice.
best people. And then in education, I mean, I was always supported to go take education classes so I could teach better,
Mm.
and yeah, I'm just very fortunate that I had all the experiences that I had because I feel like it's made me a better designer and hopefully a better teacher too because of it. When I taught at Iowa State, I put all of my educational videos for my students on that website.
Oh, okay.
And I really didn't do much. And if you look for newsletters, you'll probably see that I wrote one a year, if that. It wasn't really like that wasn't the priority in terms of
Right.
gaining an audience and making it big. It was just kind of sitting there to
Yeah.
help my students. So a lot of those early videos were there because they were confused about how to stipple or they were
Yeah.
confused about, what's the difference between spread and width on a plant. So a lot
Mhm.
of those earlier videos were because I was just making a video that I can link to. So I would make those videos for them, but they were public. And then of course I wrote the Peanut Butter and Jelly Garden ebook, which at the
Okay.
time I wrote it, I was kind of hoping it was going to be a book, but it didn't work out. And my agent at the time said, "This is a good thing. Like, use that little book that you made as the proposal and now give it away as a lead magnet
Mm.
online." I'm like, "What's a lead magnet?" Like, that was like back in 2013, 2012 when I wrote that. So it just sat there and people just signed up for it. And my audience grew kind of behind the scenes organically because they just downloaded that book. So that's kind of how that audience grew over time.
You just got me thinking. You're talking about the difference between stippling and these techniques. I think there's something really lovely about, like, hand drawing your work, and do you have thoughts on hand drawing versus digital drawing?
I truly believe you should understand basic drawing skills before you go into
Mhm.
the computer because what usually happens, so basic things like line weights, like
Yeah.
line weights are so important to be able to read a drawing. And anybody will tell you that, even if you're in another profession. I had an engineer once be a client for my students, and he said to my students, "I have to tell you how nice it is that I can read your drawings because we get drawings all the time and we can never understand with all the layers what's happening. I feel like you need to understand those basics, like how do you draw a plant symbol? Why do you use a crosshair versus a dot in the middle? How do you use
Mm.
line weights so you can actually read the drawings? How do you do
Mhm.
all of that?" And I like teaching them by hand first because I feel like it's a little bit more flowy. You can experiment, you can see what your style is. And then when you move to the computer, and I'm not against the computer, I use it all the time.
Yeah.
And I use AutoCAD for like almost 10 years. But when people move to the computer after learning how to hand draw, I get sad when they drop line weights, for instance. I'm like, "No, your
Yeah.
computer drawings are so much stronger if you actually have line weights." And I mean by line weights, for those that don't know, it's the thickness of a line. Objects that are closer to you in plan view are thicker. So a canopy tree would be thicker, and then
Mhm.
anything down on the ground farther away from you is thinner. So those really detailed lines for paving and that kind of stuff would be the
Mhm.
thinnest lines.
Mhm.
And we had to do line weights when I worked at Iowa State for in facilities. When we were doing our AutoCAD drawings, we were told to use certain line thicknesses for each of those layers. And that's when it really stuck with me. I'm like, "Oh, yeah, this makes so much sense." So I truly believe it's important to understand those basics. And then when they move into the computer, it's easier for them to apply those ideas. Now, I'm not saying you can't learn on the computer first. I just feel like when you're learning a creative process on a computer,
Yeah.
sometimes it's restrictive. And I want students to feel comfortable enough to do sketches, quick
Yeah.
sketches on the fly with a client at the table if they need
Yeah.
to, and not be like, "Oh," and not have to apologize for their drawing skills. We shouldn't apologize anyway, because who cares if we're messy and sketchy? We're all messy and sketchy, even in real life.
It's about, like, getting your thoughts out and, and being able to see them in correlation with the space. Those initial drawings are just a way to help think, I think.
Exactly. It is. I agree. It's thinking on paper. That's a
Yeah.
great way of saying it. So AutoCAD type programs, those are awesome, like Vectorworks, Dynaescape, all those are
Mhm.
awesome. When you are doing big projects, they're easy
Yeah.
to make revisions, right? Like, why would you like do a 3-acre garden And now you have to make all these revisions. You don't want to draw it all again, right?
Right.
So
Right.
and at Iowa State, we did AutoCAD because we were making base maps that we had to archive after so people could see
Wow.
later, what did
Yeah.
Lisa plant there?
Yeah.
What were those? Like, so they're all archived. So I totally get it. The nice thing now is what makes me happy is now there's digital tablet programs where you can still draw,
Yeah.
but now you can erase. So for me, that's like the happy medium. So for
Yeah.
those people who are doing smaller projects, like smaller residential, doing a design on a tablet is awesome if you like to hand draw. I always tell people if you're not sure, just start hand drawing. I always encourage them to look at like Morpholio Trace or Procreate or Concepts is another one.
I've been using Morpholio Trace
Yes.
a lot for all of my just like conceptual stuff. And then a lot of times we're making revisions on clients' properties too. And so you can
Mhm.
take a picture, you can do a draw over, and then
Yes,
you can give
yes.
them a really quick idea of what you're thinking. Remove this, we're going to do this. I think it's a really great way to do really quick on the fly stuff.
I'm
Yeah.
glad you mentioned about taking photos. That's one of the things I love about it too, is you can take a photo of a site and then draw proposed things right over it.
I have like a layer on my iPad, and so it feels texturally
Yes.
like paper. I love it because it
Yes.
kinda, like, provides that little bit of drag, so it feels like a
Yes.
pencil. Everything I had ever done, it was drawn in a notebook, and so it was hard switching from my notebooks because I just have, like, stacks from the years of
I
whatever I
love
was
that.
working on and designing.
I love drawing on my tablet, and you can draw anywhere. You don't even need a drafting board, which is nice too. For those that don't know, Morpholio Trace was developed by architects.
Mm,
So it's actually made for designers and
yeah.
it's easier to scale something in Morpholio Trace. So I should mention that. It's a great program. And then Procreate, which is also very popular,
Mhm.
and Fresco, which is what I use, are more illustration programs. You can still draw things to scale. You just have to put a grid on in the
Okay.
background. I actually just told my students this yesterday. Get both. Try
Yeah.
one. Like,
Yeah.
I have a student that draws her plant symbols in Procreate, and then she
Mm.
brings them in a Morpholio Trace and makes stencils out of them because she feels like she has more
Yeah.
freedom in Procreate. So
Yep.
a lot
I
of
could
people
see
use
that.
them together, and they're not that expensive. Sometimes I think we think too much about, "Oh, what program am I gonna use, and should I make
Right.
the investment?" Well, it's $20.
It's not a lot.
It's not. So
No.
just start learning one, and if you're like, "Oh, this isn't right," you just spend $20 to tell you it wasn't right, and that's okay. And then
Yeah.
you can try the next one. So that's why
Yeah.
I love these tablet programs because you can still hand draw, which I
Yeah.
love. And yes, you need to have a film on top, and I use Paper-like, just like
Yeah.
Claire was mentioning, it makes it rougher. So it feels like you're drawing on something. And then just explore. If you want to learn Procreate, Amy Fideli at
Oh,
prettypurpledoor.com.
yeah.
She
Yeah.
teaches an awesome Procreate course for landscape designers. She's very specific. A lot of my students have taken it and enjoyed it. So
Okay.
I just wanted to mention that the fact that she's focusing on landscape design and not just general illustration, I think has been
Yeah.
really helpful. I know for my students. For Morpholio Trace, Henry Gao is a good
Okay.
person. He's been talking to a lot of landscape designers. He wants to make sure he can reach out to landscape designers and help them also with Morpholio Trace.
Ooh.
So Henry Gao is another neat person
Okay.
for education for Morpholio Trace.
Most of the people that come to Paper Garden Workshop, are they mostly people who are in design professions, or what's the makeup of your groups?
Mm. Over time, we have figured out it's probably around 70% of people that are dreaming about doing landscape design as a
Yeah.
profession, and they're not really sure how to get into it, or they've been
Mhm.
doing it for a couple of years, but they just need a little bit more support to propel them a little bit more. And then I would say probably 25 to 30% are homeowners that want to learn. I actually have quite a few people that don't practice landscape design as a profession, but they just love learning
Yeah.
about topics because I have a membership and we just learn about a different topic every month. And they love gardens and they love design and they're not doing it full time, but they just love learning. And it's kind of cool because we have a big community, so they get to talk to each other and it's fun to get the insight.
Yeah.
I love the insight of both people that do it for a living and people that don't because we all have such interesting takes on things. And so I love that mix, but I would say it's mostly people that are beginner that are pivoting into this profession.
Yeah.
I would say
Okay.
that's my expertise because when I taught at Iowa State in the hort department, my students were just starting in design. So that's most of my education is helping people get started.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always say if you want something more advanced, go see Kelly Norris because they're
Yeah.
awesome. I mean, I can
Yeah.
teach that, but they teach it so much better. So I'll get everybody started, get them on their footing, and then
Yeah.
I encourage them to take the more advanced classes from other people.
I loved the newsletter that you sent out about celebratory beacons.
Mhm.
I just love that as a label, it's like it's not just a table, it's a place where you experience life and you develop memories and you build these connecting points.
So celebratory beacons, I can't take credit for that. That is Ingrid Fattel-Lee from the book
Mm,
Joyful,
okay.
and we've been reading Joyful in our membership.
Yeah.
And what I like about that book, we actually just met with the author a couple days ago, which was awesome.
Oh,
But she is a designer herself, and I think it's industrial design that she's in.
okay.
And what I like about that book is that she doesn't just talk in philosophical terms of how to be happy and joyful.
Mhm.
She brings it to the physical as a
Yes.
designer. So how do you create physical spaces? And she uses everything: music, architecture, landscape design. So it's all the design professions. And
Right.
she has these 10 aesthetics of joy, and she talks about each one. And one of them
Yeah.
is celebration, is one of the aesthetics.
Yeah.
And in that section, she brought up this idea of celebratory beacons or focal points. She uses the word focal point also, but I kind of like the word
Right.
beacon more because I like that it draws you in. And so I'm like, oh my gosh. So I started thinking about, well, how can we use this in landscape design?
Yeah.
Because she was using other examples in her book. And I'm like, oh my gosh, duh, it's fire pits. That's why we love them. And dining areas, wherever people would naturally come together
Mhm.
in a space and linger. And I'm like, this is like the most amazing thing. I've never heard of it that way before. This is why we
Yeah.
need to read books.
Yeah.
And this
We
is
need to
why
read
we
more.
shouldn't only read landscape design books. And
Yes.
don't get me wrong, I
Yeah.
mean, I'm always reading I mean, here. There's a lot of landscape design books in my studio right now. Tons of them. But I love books on the fringe or on the
Yeah.
edge, and I especially love books that are in different, like, I love graphic design books because there's
Yeah.
so much that you can take from graphic design and apply it to landscape design. It's
Mhm.
just a different way of looking at it. So
Yeah.
when I was reading Joyful, I'm like, every chapter, I'm like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa." I mean, it was just amazing. I mean, things like the idea of pattern.
Yeah.
Pattern is wonderful for when you have complex things. So in her case, she was using music as the example. Like if you have a complex piece of music, you need some patterns for people to be able to understand it, right?
Mhm.
So let's use this in landscape design. If you love wild plantings or that wild aesthetic, if you
Yeah.
have some kind of pattern, people are going to understand it and accept it more. What maybe the pattern is color in
Mhm.
that planting. Maybe it's texture. Maybe it's how the planter itself or the bed itself is organized. Maybe there's some patterns there. So when you put pattern with, something that's more chaotic, it actually makes it more accepting and more understandable. So
Yeah.
this is, I mean, and we know these things in design. Like I've learned
Yeah.
these things, but when you hear it from that perspective, in terms of joy and people,
Yeah.
because you were talking about people, like
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
not just designing spaces, we're designing spaces for people. So that's
Right.
where the celebratory beacons came from. I couldn't stop thinking about it. That was such a busy week for me. And I'm like, I should really write what I was going to write about and not do this, but I couldn't get it out of my head. I'm like, I have to share this because this is so awesome.
It's this place to welcome people in, and that's what people are looking for. They're looking for more from their space than the plants. They wanna celebrate those spaces with other people, and I love that, and I think it's, like, fundamental to developing a space is to have somewhere for people to land.
Exactly.
Benches, tables, fire pits, or whatnot, but those are places where people land and, you build life there too, and so it, like, expands life outside of the walls of the home and into the gardens, and I don't know, it's very romantic.
I know. Isn't it? And Ingrid Fattel describes it as the energy. Like that's where the energy of the
Yeah,
garden comes together. I'm like, that is so cool. And I have to
yeah.
mention one more book that when you were talking about
Ooh,
connection in the
okay, I
garden,
love a good book.
one of my friends wrote a book called Conversation Gardens.
Okay, okay.
And she wrote it probably 3 or 4 years ago, Lynn Kuhn, and we went to college together, and she wrote this book because she loves the idea of how do we get people to connect and being
Yeah,
outdoors. She's a landscape architect, and
mhm,
how do we create these spaces so
yeah,
people can connect? So she calls them conversation gardens, which to me is very similar to what a celebratory beacon would
Mhm.
be, but I wanted to mention that because that's another person that has given me this idea. She
Yeah.
is all about that connection when we design spaces, which I think is really cool.
I love that. I love that. Do you have to it's sometimes you have to, remind people to put somewhere for people to be in there
Yeah.
or more space for people to be. How do you kind of approach that
So, Claire, you are talking
dynamic?
my language. So, probably almost every talk I've given in the last 10 years always starts with what's the difference between spatial design
Yeah.
and planting design? Because I feel like, especially if you're new to the
Mhm.
profession, you may not understand the spatial design end of things. That's what you're talking about.
Mhm.
And I always tell my students that we are designing outdoor spaces or
Mhm.
outdoor rooms. And yes, we can do pollinator gardens, we can invite
Yeah.
everything else, but we can do that once we've addressed the functional spaces for people. And so that's where I always start. Like, so spatial design is we're designing the outdoor spaces or the garden rooms.
Yeah.
So when we first lay it out, we actually just did a month on this on organizing the garden floor. I like to start with the garden floor to organize.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
see it as a puzzle.
Yeah.
And I tried to figure out, okay, so let's use my yard as an example. When we bought our house during COVID, of course, we were home all the time, right? So
Right.
we're both teachers and we were teaching from home. So we're like, let's do something with this yard. And so we started thinking about, my husband's like, I want an area where we can entertain a lot of people. We want a fire pit so we can relax back there. We want an area where we could just, pop up tables or put containers there for
Yeah.
plants or whatever. So we had that conversation. And I always tell my students, I'm not thinking about plants at this stage at
Yeah.
all. None. That doesn't
Yeah.
even come in my brain. I'm thinking about how do I want to use these spaces or what kind of spaces do I need?
Right.
And then what size do they need to be? Like in my case, we wanted this big table that could fit 12 people. So I found a table and then I
Yeah.
designed the space to fit that. So one of the tools that I use to lay the structure out of the different rooms is lines of force. And I don't know if you use that at all, but it's basically lines of forces. You can read about it in Residential Landscape Architecture
Ooh.
by Booth and Hiss. Great book. Anyway, what it is you're taking lines from your house and you're creating a grid onto the
Yeah.
landscape. And you can go to my website too and just type in lines of force and you'll find articles on it. And that grid helps you identify the logical places to put things. Now, I have a very
To start.
geometric backyard,
Okay.
but I always tell my students this too. You can have a very geometric yard, but that doesn't mean your plantings can't be wild. And
Right.
I would say I have more wild plantings, but I have a very structured, the rooms are very structured. So I designed my rooms
Mhm.
and I made sure they were the correct size, made sure they were usable, figured out the materials to use.
Yeah.
And then the beds were basically everything else.
Yeah.
I always tell people use plants to hug your space
Yeah.
because rooms are floors, walls, and ceilings. So the floor is what we're designing to figure out the function, like how big does it need to be? And then you can start
Right.
popping walls up. And when I say walls, I don't mean literal walls. I mean, it could be,
Yeah.
but it could be perennial borders, plants,
Right.
hedges, tree trunks, whatever. And then you have ceilings if you want a ceiling. Lights, umbrellas, trees of
Canopy. Yeah.
canopies of the trees. So the beds in our yard were basically empty. I mean, I just buy plants as I need them over the years to fill in the bed. And then in my case, I'm trying to use design plant communities. I'm trying to understand my white oak plant
Ooh.
community in central Iowa, what is native to that. And then
Okay.
I introduce other plants that are not invasive. So I don't use just natives, but it starts with a native community.
Okay.
And then I insert other plants. And in the landscape architecture department at Iowa State, it was ecology based. So we learned native plants. It's been very helpful.
Yeah.
And we learned about plant communities, which is also very helpful. I'm very fortunate for that education. So yes, over the years, and it's getting full. It's not totally done, but I'll get to it when I get to it. But at
It
least the
happens over time.
hardscapes. Yeah,
Yeah.
and but the spaces are done, right? The
Yeah.
functional spaces that you're talking about. We can eat out there. We have our celebratory beacons. We have our our table that we definitely linger at, and we have our fire pit in the
Yeah.
back.
There's a lot of plant collectors, and we have to have places for both, you know? I understand that the plant collection often drives the gardening. I fully get it. But if you don't develop the space for people to be, then one, you either won't use the garden, or two, you'll cut through those garden beds and those plants
Right.
won't develop the way that they're supposed to either. Sometimes it's hard to kind of take a step back and go, okay, now we're going to pull back
Yeah.
and like catalog all of the ways that you want to be in your space and you see yourself using this space. Because if you don't do that first, it's really hard to do it later. I mean, it
Right.
can be done, but it's much harder to develop those spaces afterwards.
Yeah. You can even look at it this way. As you're designing your spaces that you use for your
Hmm.
dining and your fire pits and your croquet or whatever you're doing,
Yeah.
you're also designing the bed spaces for where your plants will be. So I just
Yeah.
try to tell people you're designing both. That's why I like the process of spatial
Yeah.
design because you're figuring out, where you're going to put those plants. So when you do go to the spring sales or the fall sales, you already know where the planting beds are. You may not know specific plants that you want to use, but you might know, you
Yeah.
know what? I want to do a hedge and I need about 10 of something that
Yeah.
grows in the shade right here. Like that's how I work.
Right.
And so I go to a sale and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, they have 10 of this that will grow fine." So then I'll buy them because I've
Yeah.
already done the spatial design.
Yep. And
So
then
if
you
you
know what your parameters are for the plants that you need.
and then you can plan that area for your collection because I mean, as
Hmm.
designers, we all do that because we wanna know what does well and what doesn't do well,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
We even have a misfit bed.
Ooh.
The misfit bed. The plants that didn't quite make it, like, maybe I had a row of something and only one survived, or we have a dog, a healer, who's very
Oh.
rough on everything, and so she's constantly breaking branches off of things, and I'm
Yeah.
like, "I don't" but it breaks my heart. I'm like, "I don't wanna get rid of it." So I put it
Yeah.
in the misfit bed.
Nice.
And surprisingly, the misfit bed sometimes is the best looking bed in the garden, which I
Oh,
think is
interesting.
hysterical because it's just a whole
Yeah.
bunch of onesies that I just kinda just throw in there
You just
because
popped
I'm
in.
so sad and pathetic that I don't wanna get rid of a plant that's still hanging on for life.
Yeah, but I think that's so common. I see that all the time. I'll have a holding bed
Yes,
that
yeah.
I'll just kind of like hold. And then that way, as we're rehabbing a space, we'll be able to pull from that first.
Yes,
Because
yes.
it's like, oh, I need a plant that's going to do X, Y, Z versus like, I love this plant. I'm going to plant it everywhere. It's a different approach. I think that that's actually super, super common is you fall in love with these plants and then you like care for these plants. And then, the idea of tossing them sometimes can be really hard.
I know. I think it's funny how my husband, he knows about the misfit bed.
Yeah.
Like when we have parties and then someone will be like, "What's that bed about?" He's like, "Oh, that's the misfit bed." And it's so funny listening to him.
Because he'll talk it out and tell everybody
Yes,
about it.
yes.
Okay.
He's learned so much.
I love this. This is great. This needs to be implemented everywhere.
Yeah. Maybe that should be my next newsletter.
The misfit bed.
Misfit beds in the pencil case.
I love it because what it is it's acknowledging how people actually work, right? And
Yeah.
so much of design is just acknowledging how people actually live. It's more than the plants, right? It's acknowledging how we show up to our spaces. The reality of it is plant collectors collect plants and people who garden
Right.
love plants and it's really hard to throw them away or to like give them away. And so I love the idea of the misfit bed. I think I'm always like, I'll encourage people to, if it's something that doesn't quite fit anymore and we want to make
Yeah.
space for something new, we'll dig it up and we'll donate it to, a garden sale or something like that. Because some of these plants, they're lovely plants. They just don't work at that space.
Yeah, I would say a lot of the issues just because I have a dog. Because we had a dachshund, he's no longer with us, my sweet little
Yeah.
guy, but he was fine. He never had any impact on the garden. Like he was small. He'd like sneak in the plants, go to the bathroom, do his thing.
Yeah.
But Sonny, our healer, is like, I want to go to that corner over there. I'm just going to do the diagonal right across through all your mom's hedges and
Right.
beautiful plants, and I'm just going to trample everything on the way. So I've been trying to understand where she goes. So like I don't plant anything along the fences, for instance,
Yeah.
because there's no point and nobody can see it anyway. And then
Yeah.
I do like mulch paths off the main hardscape path.
Okay.
So she at least has somewhere to go. So I've been trying to develop a like secondary path system
Yeah.
for her. And then corners, I had to put containers on corners because then she doesn't cut them. And I
Yep.
have to do raised beds. Like if I want to enclose a room, like our
Yeah.
dining area, I have to use a container on one side because that's the only way I'm gonna be able to create that wall. It's just something it's just something you learn. It's just like, but I love her. I'm not gonna get rid of her. So
Right. They're part of the family too, and you have to design for that. I was actually literally having this conversation with a client 2 days ago about a space where she's got these 2 big dogs and they're just rolling all over. And I was like, I think this is going to be an area where she's like, I want to sit there. And I'm like, I fully understand why, like the view. I mean, it's encapsulated beautifully with this like arbor and wisteria, and it's a gorgeous spot. The dogs also really, really love it. And at this point, I'm like, I think the only thing that is going to keep them out of there is actual planters, like
Yeah.
keeping them out of there so that she can sit in that spot too. Before making any sort of decision, taking the time to observe it and then think about what the problems are, get it down, and to think about how you can kind of steer.
Yeah. Like, how can you work with it, but still aesthetically do what you wanna do?
Right.
That's the hard part.
Yeah.
Like, for me, I've learned in the last 2 years, I just buy a whole bunch of pretty
Mm,
obelisks
okay.
and tutus, those types of things, and when I plant stuff now, I just put one of those on the plant. Otherwise, she'll dig it up because she loves fresh soil. It must be cool for her, like, cold.
Yeah.
So she'll, like, dig it in, she'll, like, wanna bury herself in it. So I have obelisks all over the yard, but I'm like, "Well, that's better than maybe chicken wire, right?" I mean, at least
Yeah.
it's a forest
Yeah.
of obelisks, but and I just move them around.
If you already have your own space and you're looking to kind of implement some of this perspective and to develop it, what kind of takeaways can you give?
I would say to think about what spaces do you already have and are they
Mhm.
serving what you want? Sometimes it's just tweaking it. Our dining area, I made it too small initially. So 3 years later, we needed to have a walk, get to another part of the yard. So I just moved it. I just pulled the walk through that dining area and I made it bigger. So I'm constantly adjusting. Always think about you're
Mhm.
creating a garden room first. How are the spaces that I actually physically walk in and use? Do I
Mhm.
need to make it bigger? Do I need to make the edges more refined? Whatever that means to you. Do I need to change the
Yeah.
materials on something because my dog's constantly digging in the gravel? That's me. That's why I say that. So sometimes you have to change materials depending on the use. So if you already have spaces, sometimes it's just a matter of looking at the spaces you have and just asking, are they serving you the way you want? And it doesn't mean you
Mm.
have to rip everything out. Sometimes it's just a matter of just moving an edge or cleaning up an edge to be able to do that?
Do you take it back to just paper, even if it's like already something that's been done before?
That's a great question. So, couple you can do it a couple ways. So this is how we did our yard. I printed
Mhm.
out a Google Earth map and I just put tracing paper over it. It was not to scale. And I just
Mhm.
started sketching ideas. So I don't want people to get freaked out, be like, oh, I don't know scale. I don't know how to draw a base map. You don't need to worry about that. We just printed out an aerial photo of our property and we have a lot of trees. So it's a little
Mm.
challenging because of the
Yeah.
trees cover, but I just drew in around the trees because we have oak trees in our backyard and I just did not do it to scale. And then my husband and I, we went outside and we used string and
Ah.
stakes. Actually, I couldn't even find stakes. I used those little, what do they call they're pieces of wood that you use to level something. Shimmies, a shimmy.
Oh, yeah.
I couldn't find stakes at our local hardware store for some reason, but just like a stake and string,
Mhm. Mhm.
and we laid out the actual areas that I drew on this plan. And again, remember the plan was not to scale. I just drew
Right.
sketches just generally so I can get his thought on it.
Yep.
And we kind of talked about it, like, yeah, that's perfect. And then we laid it out with string and stakes and we measured it with tape measures to make sure it's going to fit the table that we wanted or the fire pit that we wanted.
Yeah.
And then we could step back and we can walk through them then. I love string and stakes because then you can just see what it feels like and do you like it? Do you not like it?
Mhm.
And then it really starts to give you an idea of, is it big enough? Is it too small? Are these the planting beds that I want?
Mhm.
And then this is the other cool part. I actually went to our second story window after we staked it out with the string and I took
Ooh.
photos. Then I was able to draw proposed drawings using those lines because I
Ooh.
didn't have you don't even have to know perspective to do that. You just have to draw in the lines, and
Yeah.
then you can start drawing in plants and other like, just not when I say drawing in plants, I mean sketchy. You don't know what they are yet. Just
Right.
ideas, like general ideas, like, I kinda want a hedge here, and I want a big tall tree here, or whatever it might be. It's just to kinda get you to understand what that space looks like. So I personally like the string and staking effect and then just doing quick sketches on a Google Earth map or something like that if you've got it.
Smart.
I mean,
Yeah.
the other option if you're doing a small space is just to take a photo of that
Yeah.
space and then draw on the photo like we had talked about earlier. And
Yeah.
if you don't have Procreate or something, you could always just take a regular photo and put tracing paper over it.
Yeah, or I mean, Apple, you just, like, do it with your finger. I mean, it's not like it's
Yeah.
not really super pretty or beautiful, but it kinda gives you an idea of what you're
Yeah.
doing. The other thing I really like is hoses because every homeowner has a
Oh, yeah,
hose.
hoses. That's a great idea.
So I'll have them like, lay out a hose. Sometimes it's easier with the ones that are collapsible than it is, like, the ones
Yes.
that are kind of
Yes.
fabricy than it is the rubber ones, but a Hoses are great because then you can kind of lay out that space too and
Yep.
like get an idea of what that actually looks like in your space. So it's like it's drawing, but it's in actual
Yes.
space.
Yes, which I think is so much easier for a lot of us.
Yeah.
And I would point out that hoses are great for curves.
Yes.
And string and stakes you can use for curves. You would need a lot more stakes. Ours
Yeah.
is very rectilinear, so that worked for us.
It
So
works better.
yeah, so it's
Yeah.
good to know that too because if you're a curvy person, just use a
Yeah.
hose. Like that's such a great idea. I always forget about that.
And just using what you have to kind of figure out
Yeah.
the space. I think it's great. So,
Yeah.
well, Lisa, I appreciate you coming on so much. And it was like
Yeah.
great to see you. So, where can people find you?
You can find me at papergardenworkshop.com. We're actually teaching our drawing class right now, so that's once a year in January. But the next opening for us is late March. The Garden Design Collective is
Ooh,
our design membership, and we open that 4 times a year, and it's to support new designers or experienced designers with their design journey, and we cover all kinds of cool topics. It's about diving into one topic at a time versus trying to do everything in a short amount of time. We take it slow and steady over many
love it.
months. So that'll open again. This year, we would like to do a design boot camp to open up the
Ooh.
collective. We haven't done this before. If you go to my website and go to the courses tab, you'll see Garden Design Collective and you can sign up there so you can kind of get a taste of it. And then we'll dive into the membership after that. It opens in late March.
I appreciate you coming on. It's good to see you.
Thank you, Claire. It was so awesome to be
Ah,
here, and I I just love talking with you. It's just you're just awesome, and I appreciate you doing this podcast. It's nice to have another, perspective on landscape design and gardening and all of that.
it's a great way to pick other people's brains.
Isn't it
And they
nice?
like
That's me.
to,
I always just
yeah.
find I don't know everything either, so I'm like, I just bring all the right people together, and then we just learn from each other.
That's it for today's episode of the Relish Gardens podcast. If you love this conversation, make sure to subscribe. We've got new episodes every week. And if you know a gardening friend who'd love this, send it their way. Sharing the show helps grow our little garden loving community. Until next time, I hope you find something in your garden to truly relish.